Story 1. My parents were going through a divorce. My mother discovered that my father had been unfaithful and located the woman involved. She went to her house to confront my father. With nothing else to do with my brother and me, she brought us along. We sat in this unfamiliar woman's living room while my parents had a heated argument. Story 2. My older brother died in a car accident when he was 20 and I was 16. He was ejected from the car through the windshield. We lived in a small town where everyone knows everyone, so everyone at my high school knew what happened before I returned. The accident occurred on a Wednesday, and I returned to school the following Monday. I was walking to the library during class and passed a friend who had fake blood dripping down her face. I didn't realize it was fake and asked her what happened in a bit of a panic. She said, "Oh, I flew through a windshield." She was in costume for a part in a play. I don't remember the details, but I do remember my heart stopping as we stared at each other for a moment before her expression changed. She tried to apologize and I said it was okay, but I can't recall anything after that moment. I think I blocked it out because it was the most uncomfortable, awkward situation I've ever experienced. Story 3. My roommate threw a New Year's Eve party, and we invited over 30 to 40 people. Only 4 people came, along with my roommate and me. These 4 guests didn't really know each other and had nothing in common. It was disappointing, but that didn't stop me from trying to have fun. I got super drunk, and after the ball drop, I hid away in my room. It was really awkward when the 4th person arrived and asked, "Am I early?" We just looked at each other and thought, "No." Story 4. As an Uber driver, I had 2 intoxicated passengers making out in the back of my car. That's pretty normal, but these passengers tried to have a conversation with me without pausing their activity. Kiss, kiss, slurp. So, are you having a busy night? Story 5. I went to use the restroom at work. The men's room has 3 toilet stalls. I took the first one. After a long time of scrolling on my phone, avoiding work and basically taking a break, I never heard a sound from anyone else, so I assumed I was alone. Then, all of a sudden, I heard someone in stall 3. Due to a lack of movement, I confirmed there was definitely no one in stall 2, so I leaned over as far as I could to see if I could confirm there was someone in stall 3 and saw the other person bent over, looking back at me. I recognized them, and I was pretty sure they recognized me. They got up and left, and we never spoke of it. Story 6. In college, I skipped class one evening with an acquaintance because she was upset over a breakup. She took me to the grand opening of a local gym, complete with an open bar and DJ. On the way there, she got into a loud argument on the phone with her ex. When we arrived, he showed up with a trash bag full of her belongings, and they began to fight on the dance floor. Both of them were arrested, and the officer who took my statement offered to drive me home since she had been my ride. When we arrived at my apartment, he asked me out. Story 7. In college, I tried to deceive the professor by claiming I missed his sign-in sheet last week and that I was present, even though I wasn't. He said, "Okay, no problem." What did we do? Thinking I was prepared, I told him what we would have covered in our syllabus. He blankly stared at me and said we sat in a circle and discussed something about current events instead. Then he added, "If you were here, you would have received this sheet," and pulled out a paper with some questions on it. The correct move here was to claim that I have a bad memory and apologize. Instead, I insisted that I thought I had that paper and just forgot. I pretended to look for it and acted progressively frustrated when I couldn't find what I knew wasn't there. This all happened during a break in class, so half the students were just watching this unfold. Eventually, he looked up and said, "How's that paper coming?" "Nothing." "Okay, let's begin again." He was clearly enjoying himself at my expense, and it seriously made me reconsider my behavior after feeling so embarrassed for lying so badly, twice. Just own your mistakes. Doubling down is never a good idea. Story 8. This was years ago, but sometimes I still lie awake thinking about it and have to force myself to think of something nice, making a humming noise to shoo it out of my mind so I don't cringe. I was at a party when a friend of mine was talking to a woman who was opening a salon and bragging about how she just bought some expensive lights. My friend immediately said, "Oh, no way. My name is an electrician. He can probably do it for you." I try not to take side jobs, so I gave her a pretty inflated price. Unfortunately, she didn't bat an eye. So there I was at the salon one evening after work, on a ladder installing some lights. She finished closing the cash register, swept up, grabbed a bottle of tequila from the office, and started drinking it straight while playing some bad music. She began complaining about how her boyfriend was troublesome, didn't know how to treat a woman, and couldn't keep a job, saying things like, "He thinks just because he has certain attributes and can be wild, I'll ignore everything." You might think, that's awkward. Well, her boyfriend came in later when I was almost done, and he was an aggressive brute. He said, "Babe, who's this?" "Oh, the electrician? You don't think I could do this? It's child's play." Then he turned to me and asked, "What's she paying you? Is she giving you money? Or what are you getting out of this?" Instead of telling him to calm down, she made it worse by saying, "If I were with him, it'd be your own fault. At least he listens to me." I wanted to crawl down from my ladder, find a hole, and disappear. I thought for sure he would hit her, and I would have to get involved. I left, and she transferred me a large amount of money the next day. I never saw her again. Story 9. Failed proposal on Halloween. A recently single girl attended our Halloween party. Her ex-boyfriend drove 1,200 miles and arrived at our doorstep during the party at 9 p.m., dressed as a knight. Not a knight in shining armor, but rather a Monty Python search for the Holy Grail-style knight. We were all shocked that he was there. He came in, found her still dancing, and dropped down on one knee while reciting an obviously rehearsed speech about how much he missed her and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. She shook her head no the entire time but let him finish speaking. Then she ran down the hallway and into one of the bedrooms. He followed her awkwardly into the room and emerged a few minutes later without looking at anyone or saying anything on his way out the door. We haven't seen him since. I'm told he's now happily married to someone else and has a couple of kids. Story 10. A friend and his wife suddenly started screaming and swearing at each other. It was in front of me, their 2 kids, and 3 other people while we were all relaxing in their hotel room before going to a wedding. It was shocking. None of us knew what to do because they were supposed to drive us to the venue. Story 11. When I was younger, I left a noticeable mark on the neck of my girlfriend 1 month into our relationship. Her father was not happy at all and told her he would punch me if he ever saw me. I was absolutely in love with this girl and did not want to jeopardize our relationship, so I made the effort to apologize. When she went to work, I drove to her house by myself, knocked on her door, and spoke to her father face to face. Thankfully, he did not hit me as he had threatened. He ended up shaking my hand and letting me leave, and later he told my girlfriend he was impressed that I came by and apologized. My then-girlfriend is now my wife, and we have been together for 15 years. Story 12. I found my girlfriend in bed with a guy I know from work. I had to return early from work because I was not feeling well that day. Story 13. Sent a condolence message to a friend whose father was dying of cancer before he actually passed away. Story 14. I was watching The Devil's Advocate with my cousin. I was about 10 and he was 15. Our grandma was sitting nearby. When the girls in the store started undressing and talking about their breasts, my grandma tried to get up to leave, but she couldn't get out of the chair on her own the first few attempts. I was frozen in horror at her frustrated attempts to leave. She has been gone for over 10 years now, and I still think of that. Story 15. Probably a car ride home with my dad. The last time I saw my dad, I was about 19 years old. I am 31 now. Before that, I hadn't seen him since I was 8 when my mom passed away in a car accident. He was extremely abusive, so my grandparents gained custody of my brother and me while he was in the hospital. Fast forward to me at 19. I returned to my home state after a serious breakup, and my uncle messaged me about hanging out. He lives a couple of hours away, so he offered to pick me up and spend a few days with me to take my mind off everything. A couple of days in, my dad wanted to hang out, and I obliged. Everything went well. We played games, laughed a lot. He's very funny, and we just had an overall good time. A few more days later, it was time for me to go back home to my grandparents. About halfway through the trip, he started discussing my grandparents and the abuse. He claimed that they essentially brainwashed me into believing he was abusive because we were too young and impressionable. After a few minutes of this, he straight up asked me, "You don't remember me ever abusing you, right?" In my head, I thought, of course I do. Very vividly on numerous occasions. However, I still had close to another hour with him on this car ride home, so I really didn't want to say yes and deal with whatever would come of that for the next hour. So I just said no. He went on more of his spiel about my grandparents being manipulative and all of that. The rest of the ride went all right, but needless to say, once I got home, I vowed to never talk to him again unless he's on his deathbed. Maybe at that time he'll confess. Story 16. As a teenager, I was having intimate moments with my girlfriend in her living room during the day, thinking her parents were at work, and we were completely naked. Suddenly, we heard her mom come home and greet the dog in the kitchen. We panicked. My girlfriend ran upstairs to her bedroom, and I looked around before bolting for the coat closet. As I stood there with nothing on, it occurred to me, what if her mom needed to hang her coat? Those felt like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I could hear her mom going about her business while my clothes lay somewhere in the living room. Finally, my girlfriend returned from her room dressed and found me in the closet. She handed me my clothes, and I quickly got dressed before going to the kitchen as if nothing was wrong. Story 17. I got on an elevator with a woman, and we each selected our floors. It was summer, so I was wearing shorts. Just as the door was about to open on her floor, I heard the camera shutter sound that phones make. I looked over, and she turned beet red, then dove off the elevator, colliding with another woman who was waiting to get on. The second woman got on and said, "What was her problem?" I explained that the first woman had tried to take a picture of me discreetly, but the camera noise had given her away. We both laughed. Story 18. I was at a friend's house in the 1980s. Cancun bracelets were in style, and I let my friend wear a few of mine because I wanted her to like me. She invited another guy friend over, which upset me, so I asked for my bracelets back. She told me they were in her room on the dresser, so I went to get them. As I entered her house, I saw her mother's boyfriend walking down the hallway with a shotgun. I froze. He approached a friend of her mother's, who was sitting in a rocking chair, and pointed the gun directly at his face, just 2 feet away. The man smiled and then pulled the trigger. His head was gone. I ran for my life. I told my parents what happened, but they didn't believe me. He was arrested the next day, and I had to give a written statement to the police. Story 19. My friend was trying to book a table at a restaurant and told the person on the phone, "I love you," and then hung up. I couldn't stop laughing that day, and she was so embarrassed. Story 20. I was visiting my mother, who lives about an hour away, and when it came time to leave, I kissed her on the mouth without any hesitation. This was not a quick peck on the cheek, but a full kiss with my lips pressed to hers. As soon as I realized what happened, all my higher brain functions ceased working, and all I managed to do was stammer. The look on my mom's face was priceless. Apparently, I am too used to giving my wife a kiss before I leave the house, and in that moment I just didn't think about it. It still gets brought up occasionally. Story 21. After giving my best man speech, I hugged the bride, which knocked over a flower vase and spilled a glass of red wine all over her dress. I still cringe at that 15 years later. I nailed the speech, though. Story 22. In 1981, I was a sophomore in high school competing in track. We were visiting another school for a track meet, one I had never been to before. Some friends and I needed to use the restroom, so we walked toward the locker rooms as directed. I reached the restroom and needed to take a seat, while my friends quickly took care of their business and left. I heard the door open, and a chorus of female voices grew closer. I sat there frozen in fear. Thankfully, I was wearing over-the-calf tube socks, so my hairy shins were hidden. The girls did what they needed to do, and I stayed quiet as they left. Fortunately, no one else came in, and I made my escape without being caught, except for my friends who had abandoned me. They were laughing heartily, but that's what friends are for. Story 23. I was getting my hair done at my usual salon, and my hairdresser was talking to another client while working on my hair. All of us are black, but I'm mixed, half white and half Jamaican on my dad's side, while they are both from Africa. For some reason, they started criticizing Jamaicans and discussing how Africans are superior. I didn't take it personally. I'm not exactly connected to the culture. I sat there silently in the chair, wondering what caused this tension that I knew nothing about. Eventually, they remembered I was there and that I was also black, so they decided to ask me where my dad is from. I hesitated and then just answered, "Oh, he's from Jamaica." Silence. It was already awkward. Then, as if it couldn't get any worse, they apologized and tried to make me feel better by telling me that Jamaicans are apparently good lovers. Why would that make me feel better? We're talking about my dad here. Story 24. I had planned to go to the lake with my family for the weekend and told my coworkers about it. As I left my desk, my boss said, "Have fun at the lake." Without thinking, I replied, "Thanks. I'll try not to drown." This is just my dry, insensitive humor. In my workplace, where death is a common occurrence, many of us make jokes like this. I completely forgot that my boss's husband had fallen off a boat and drowned at the same lake a decade before. I felt like the world's biggest jerk. I still work with her, and it has never come up again. Story 25. I come from a conservative Muslim country. As a family, including my parents, my younger sisters, and myself at 13 years old, we sat together to watch Titanic. My parents definitely didn't know that we were going to see Kate Winslet in a nude scene. Story 26. I used to date a girl whose dad was a typical ballbuster type who gave his daughter's boyfriends a hard time. Once at a family barbecue, he said in front of everyone that there was some distant family with the same last name as me, which is fairly rare and even rarer in spelling, so it definitely wasn't a match. He and an uncle also grilled me about my career goals and wanted a full business plan for my next 5 years. I was a sophomore in college and an art student, and they demanded I draw something on a napkin for them to evaluate my chances of success. It was a wild time. Story 27. A man arrives at the figure drawing class a few minutes late. He rushes to check in, sets up his easel, gathers his supplies, and then looks up. To his surprise, it's me, his best friend's girlfriend, posing nude in an armchair. While I am perfectly fine with the situation, he looks completely shocked, as if someone shot his dog. Story 28. Teenage me was hanging out on the couch with my dad, watching a mid-1980s cable movie channel. The movie was Nunzio, with the protagonist being an intellectually disabled man. There is a very graphic scene where a woman sexually abuses him. She enjoys herself, but he doesn't really understand what's happening. It was both titillating and disturbing then, and it's just disturbing now. Neither of us said anything at the time. I was embarrassed and excused myself. My dad was embarrassed enough to mention it to my mom, who later asked me if I was okay. Story 29. I was looking at a cute girl and walked straight into a road sign, which produced a loud boink sound followed by lots of laughter. That was over 10 years ago, and it seems I will remember it for the rest of my life. Story 30. Stripping off all my clothes with 30 other men while being yelled at by 2 older instructors, then standing shoulder to shoulder and being instructed on how to shower. Boot camp, the memories. Story 31. It was my grandmother's birthday, and we all took her to lunch. There were about 8 of us. My former partner was our waitress. Story 32. I had to use the bathroom during class once and walked in on 2 people moaning in one of the stalls. I just went to another bathroom after realizing what they were doing. Story 33. One time, my in-laws stayed at my house for a few weeks. We don't usually have guests, so this was a huge adjustment for us. I work from home, so I spent most days shut in my office and then would scurry through the house to the bedroom to try to get through the rest of the day. One day, as I walked out of the office, my father-in-law was sitting on the couch in the living room. I engaged in the minimum required small talk as I made my way toward the exit. Just then, I heard what was clearly a porn ad on his phone. You know those overtly explicit direct ads you have to skip before the video starts? He quickly skipped it, and I completely lost my train of thought. I was trying to play it off like I didn't know what I had just heard, but I literally couldn't finish my sentence. I just stood there stammering until I managed to end what I was saying and left. We had been talking for at least a few minutes. That whole time, He had been sitting there watching explicit content on his phone while talking to me. How many other times had he done this? Story 34. In 6th or 7th grade, my class took a field trip to the Holocaust Museum. The schedule included a survivor sharing their story, followed by lunch. Towards the end of the survivor's account, I noticed another group begin to rise and head toward the cafeteria. I foolishly got up amidst a crowd of fellow students who were still seated and started walking across the area where the Holocaust survivor was speaking, literally right past him, heading to the cafeteria because I was hungry and thought it was time to eat. My teacher was mortified, and so was I. Sometimes I lay awake at night thinking about that moment. Story 35. A friend had a birthday party, and she was sure her boyfriend was going to propose. As she opened gifts, he finally handed her his. Expecting a ring and a proposal, she received a necklace instead. Awkward silence followed. She said, "So, has everyone met everyone else yet?" Story 36. My stepdad had a friend who did odd jobs and asked me if I wanted to work with him. I was 14 at the time and needed money, so I said yes. It was a cleaning job in a mall early in the morning. I woke up late and the guy wasn't mad. Instead, he offered me a joint which tasted bad but got me really high. When I arrived, everyone gave me strange looks. A 14-year-old Irish boy high out of his mind with a 40-year-old man who was also high. I cleaned the same spot for about 2 hours until the job was done. They didn't let me do anything else because I couldn't speak the local language. It was the easiest job I've ever done. Story 37. In college, I had an annoying friend who wanted to hang out one day. I texted her saying I wasn't on campus. Then she knocked on my dorm room door asking for my roommate. Stupidly, I ran to the bathroom and hid. An hour passed, and I was texting my roommate from the bathroom, asking her to get the girl out. I could hear her laughing, and our other friend asked what was going on. My roommate said nothing, and the other girl replied, "Okay, fine. You're being weird. I'm going to the bathroom." I panicked and pushed against the door. We were pushing and pulling, and she exclaimed, "What is wrong with your door?" She was much larger than I was and gave the door a strong push with her shoulder, knocking me to the floor. I got up and said, "Surprise! We don't talk anymore." Story 38. Back in high school, my girlfriend and I were upstairs in her bedroom under the pretense of watching a movie while her mom was downstairs. We were in a compromising position when suddenly her mom burst in, asking my girlfriend about something. I lay there, hoping her mom would go away and not ask us to get up or disturb us, while my girlfriend was talking to her. Her mom then asked her why my girlfriend's face was so red or why she looked so flustered, and I think we made up something about the air conditioning. She eventually left, but the moment was ruined, and the mood was completely lost. Story 39. My mom is very sweet and innocent. She was dating a guy named Mike, and he brought up marriage at the dinner table while we were all eating together. Mike, Mom, my brother, and I. He talked about marriage, expressing his love for Mom and suggesting that they should get married soon. I didn't much like this guy. He seemed untrustworthy. I looked at my mom, thinking, "Really? Are you going to marry this guy?" She understood my thoughts. She raised her hand to shield her mouth, almost as if she was going to whisper something to me without anyone else noticing. However, instead of saying no, she shook her head for everyone to see. To this day, we still use that gesture when we want to sarcastically say no to something. Story 40. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I visited a friend's house, but his mother was unaware of my presence. Whenever she returned home from work, she would leave her clothes in a basket and go straight to take a bath. Not knowing I was there, she left her clothes, went upstairs, and walked in front of the television in her underwear. I covered my eyes after a couple of seconds, but the image lingered. Story 41. My childhood best friend invited my wife and me over for a game night. Halfway through playing Uno, his 4-year-old daughter walked over, held a phone up to my wife's face, and said, "Look, mommy naked." She had pulled up inappropriate photos of my friend's wife. The awkward part was that my friend had no idea the photos even existed or that she ever did things like that. He looked completely confused. His wife became very defensive, and my wife and I decided to leave immediately. About 2 months later, she left him and admitted to cheating with multiple men since the week before their wedding. They had been married for 7 years. Story 42. When I was in my early 20s in 2009, my girlfriend, also in her early 20s, got kicked out of her house and my parents allowed her to live with us. She was supposed to stay in the guest room, but she ended up in my bed most nights for obvious reasons. She started by going back to her room after our activities, but after a while, she just stayed there. And my parents were kind of like, whatever, they're adults. One morning, we woke up and decided to have some morning activities, and then my mom opened the door and walked in. Luckily, we had been under the covers, but I had to lay there, still inside my girlfriend, but motionless, trying to look like we were simply just spooning. I had an entire conversation with my mom about the day's upcoming events. By the way, we celebrate our 13th wedding anniversary next weekend. Story 43. When I was in the army, I attempted airborne school but ended up injuring my leg badly enough that I couldn't complete it. So I was waiting for the army to sort out what it was going to do with me, and Thanksgiving rolled around. At the time, there was a program where local families would invite soldiers stuck on base away from their own families to spend the holiday with them. Very few soldiers in the company signed up for this. The company commander ended up making it mandatory for everyone in the barracks. The guy I was paired with and I were not among those who participated willingly. So there we were, two people who barely knew each other, stuck spending the evening with some folks just trying to be nice, and we both clearly had no desire to be there. I tried to be polite, but I am a terrible actor, and I'm sure it was obvious. The whole thing felt absurdly awkward from start to finish. Story 44. So this happened 3 months ago. I matched with a girl on Tinder, and things were pretty straightforward. We both agreed it was just going to be a one-night stand, no strings attached and no weird stuff. She invited me over to her place. We chatted a bit, the vibes were good, and things started getting hot. Well, midway through, the door opened, and a guy walked in. It turned out to either be her boyfriend or husband. I never got a clear answer. He casually said, "Don't worry, I'm cool with it. You guys can keep going," as if it were the most normal Tuesday night activity. I froze for a second, then politely and awkwardly wrapped things up and got out of there faster than my dignity. I'm still trying to process what that was. Look, I'm not here to shame anyone, but a heads up would have been nice before throwing me into a live cuckolding scene. I still can't tell if I was a guest or a prop. Story 45. I caught my ex engaging in a private activity while he claimed to have no interest in intimacy and had been turning me down for weeks. I was perplexed. He tried to explain that he needed to do it for a medical reason, which led to one of the most awkward conversations ever. I don't have an issue with personal time, but it hurt when I made attempts at conversations and romantic gestures and received indifference in return. Story 46. This is a graphic story, so you are forewarned as it contains disturbing images related to fecal matter. About 5 years ago, I experienced a bout of serious constipation. My doctor prescribed a high-dose laxative. One morning, I took it without knowing what might happen. I hadn't gone for about 4 days. After taking the laxative, I decided to catch up on some repairs around the house. I made a list and drove 20 minutes to my hardware store. About 2 hours after taking the laxative, while I was in the store, my stomach started rumbling. I went to the back of the store to the men's room. The sign indicated it was for employees only, and the door was locked. I tried to exit the store, but unfortunately, I was only 6 feet from the door when it happened. 3 days' worth of meals caught up with me. It was the largest incident of my life, and both pant legs filled up and started to leak. I left a significant trail out to my car with a portion inside the store. When I got to my car and started driving, another incident occurred. At this point, I was a mess. My car was a mess, and I left a confused group of people back at the store. I got home, and fortunately, my wife wasn't there. I went to the backyard, removed my pants, hosed myself off, discarded the pants and shoes, and cleaned up the car. I have not returned to that store since. Story 47. I was with my sister at a pub, and we were talking to a woman outside. My sister congratulated her and asked when she was due to give birth. The woman immediately broke down and shouted that she was not pregnant, just overweight. You could have cut the tension with a knife. Story 48. I got married very young and it did not work out. I realized quickly what I had gotten into and tried to leave a few times, but my friends always informed him of my whereabouts. When I finally managed to leave and get a place of my own, I didn't feel safe calling any friends to help me move my belongings. I was bartending at the time and asked a few of my regular customers to assist me. My ex-husband invited over basically every friend we had. I, along with two customers from the bar, had to walk back and forth through a house full of people staring angrily at us while we packed and loaded my things. It was a miserable experience. I ended up paying them both a significant amount of money because I felt guilty for putting them in such an awkward situation. Story 49. I dated a girl on and off for 3 years. There were strong emotions tied to her. We broke up for good. She ended it. Heartbroken, I wanted to at least be friends still. She felt that I was still hung up on her after a few months. Even though she had a new boyfriend, she asked me to find someone else to date before we hung out again so that she could be sure I was over her and ready to move on. I found a boyfriend, an awesome guy. We dated for a few months, and he asked me if I would like to move in with him. He said he was renting a room from two people who didn't mind me staying as long as I paid my share of the rent. I moved in. 3 weeks into living there, I learned that the two people renting to my boyfriend and allowing us to live there were the parents of his girlfriend. So now, every time their son came to see his parents, along came my ex as well, which usually led to me being sent outside or told to leave. I allowed myself to be treated poorly in this manner for far too long, trying to accept it and make it work. Finally, I got away from it all. Story 50. My wife and friend of 18 years admitted to me that her entire persona was a lie, that our relationship was faked, and that I was merely a placeholder for her. I don't think she realized the gravity of her admission, but it was very awkward to learn this and to recognize that she displayed psychopathic traits. My skin crawled in her presence from that point on. Story 51. When I was younger, I used to deliver pizzas. One day, I went to deliver an order, and when I arrived, the woman's husband or boyfriend was out front with his own pizza, trying to resolve their argument. He told me to leave. She took my order and I left. That's the most memorable experience. Story 52. Memorial Day weekend 2021. I discovered that my ex-wife was planning to leave me after my suspicions for at least 5 months. I convinced her to attend couples counseling for a total of 2 sessions, which turned out to be pointless. She had made up her mind, and I later found out she was cheating. The time between then and when she left in mid-July was the most awful, awkward, and heartbreaking period of my life. Felt like I was in emotional turmoil. Story 53. Medical internship, surgery rotation, first week. We lost a patient, a woman who had gone into sepsis because of a perforated hernia. She wanted to go to palliative care due to her age and personal situation, but the surgeon coerced her into accepting treatment. The doctor instructed me to inform her family and gather all the information for her death certificate. Since this was a small hospital during the COVID pandemic, there was no private room for this discussion, and only one family member was allowed, her granddaughter. To make matters worse, that was the moment when the nurses were preparing the body for delivery to her family. They were also students and did not know how to remove one of the medicine pumps, so they called a senior nurse, but it took her about 30 minutes to arrive. Instead of leaving or remaining silent, these nurses chose to gossip and joke around. I was with a woman who had just lost her grandmother, gathering information for the death certificate just meters away from her body, while 2 nurses talked about their celebrity crushes and laughed loudly. I tried to support her the best I could. This was not only my first week, but also my first experience with a patient's death, and I was alone with no attending physician for 30 minutes. Story 54. The time my friend talked to a stranger. We both needed to use the restroom after going out for lunch. 3 stalls were available and the middle one was occupied, so we each went into the ones on either side. All of a sudden, a woman in the middle stall let out a really loud, squeaky sound. My friend then shouted, "What did you just say?" I started laughing so hard that I couldn't breathe, and my friend kept asking what was so funny, which made me laugh even more. The next thing you know, the poor woman in the middle stall flushed the toilet and left. Once she was gone and we finished what we needed to do, I told my friend what was so funny, which led to more laughter from both of us. She was mortified, but not as mortified as the woman who made the sound. Thank goodness we didn't know what she looked like while walking back through the restaurant. Story 55. During my first week at my job, I entered a coworker's room. He had a son who also worked there, and there was a hunting picture with him standing and what I thought was his son holding a deer. I remarked, "You and your son got a big buck." To my surprise, he replied, "That's my wife." I felt so embarrassed and quickly exited the room. They looked identical from a distance, and I made sure not to comment on any more photos. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Story 56. My friend thought I was gay and started changing in front of me at a pool party. This was before I learned she was a lesbian, and I mistakenly interpreted her behavior as a bold expression of interest. There was much confusion and awkwardness that night, but we laugh about it now. Story 57. I walked in on my roommate. The door was unlocked, and it was noon. Who does that at noon? Story 58. I tried talking to a girl who was showing signs that she liked me. We texted a bit, but she was also antisocial. I attempted to start a conversation, but all I received were short responses like, "Okay," and "good." Story 59. My husband's brother and his wife lost their first baby a few days after he was born. It was a long, painful process for them. Several months later, they visited us, and my stepdad was present. This is important. My stepdad was fully aware that their baby had passed away. We were playing a game, and the card prompt was, "Name the strangest thing you'd find in a bag from the drive-thru." My stepdad blurted out, "A dead baby." All of us were shocked. First of all, that's a strange answer at any time, but to say that to people whose baby just died was beyond words. It was awful. Story 60. In high school, there was a girl whom I didn't know had a crush on me. When her mother passed away, I went to their house with chrysanthemums in hand. As an awkward Year 10 student, I didn't know how to approach someone who was grieving. I intended to say, "I'm very sorry for your loss." But when she opened the door, I completely forgot what I wanted to say and blurted out, "You know why I'm here." She replied, "Oh my goodness. I've actually been meaning to tell you as well," and attempted to hug me. I quickly converted her hug into a handshake, leaving her confused. I then said, "These are for your mum." Well, not for her, but because she passed. She took the flowers and closed the door in my face. Later, I asked her friends if she was okay and found out that she had a crush on me. In summary, I gave flowers to a girl as a form of condolences without knowing her feelings for me. My condolence greeting turned into an ambiguous comment that made her think I liked her back. She tried to hug me, and I responded by shaking her hand. Story 61. I ended a relationship in front of a plane full of people. A woman called me out for being frustrated with my partner at the time. She missed the part where my ex had consumed 4 margaritas, and I was trying to help her manage herself for our flight home after a miserable vacation. It was a 2.5-hour quiet flight during which I felt made to look like some sort of abuser. It was a terrible experience. Story 62. I met a woman at work who I knew was married, but she said they were separated. I started having an affair with her. I was 19 and she was 25. While we were fooling around on her couch, I heard a key go into the lock on the front door. The door opened a couple of inches because of the chain lock. I heard her husband say, "Hey, open the door. Who is in there? Whose car is out front?" She ducked outside and came back, saying, "I think you should go." The guy was outside with flowers in one hand and wine in the other. It turned out she was unfaithful, and he was in the police academy. He came home to try to mend a fight they had. I know I made a mistake and learned a lesson that day. It was a very awkward situation. Story 63. When I was 19, I went to a bar to meet my friend, who was running late. I sat at the bar table to have a drink while I waited for her. A man, old enough to be my dad, sat next to me and started hitting on me. I am a very awkward person by nature, and I felt like laughing at him, but I didn't want to do that. So, I sat there trying not to laugh as he continued flirting with me. At the same time, I felt incredibly awkward because he started telling me about his kids and wife. Luckily, the bartender intervened and got him to leave. Story 64. I am going to visit my girlfriend, who is home recovering from a minor operation. As I stand there talking to her and meeting her mother for the first time, a man walks in with dinner for her. He introduces himself as her husband. She needs something she left at my place, so I end up driving my girlfriend's husband to pick it up. He shares a story about how he has an anger problem. The last time he got so angry, he woke up in the hospital because he blacked out and became violent. He stopped seeing her after that. Story 65. Not me directly, but I recommended a television series to a friend. This friend sits down on the following Saturday night to watch the show with his 3 teenage daughters. The series was Fleabag. The opening scene has the main character getting into bed with a man she just picked up, and he has unannounced anal sex with her while she looks at the camera and calmly describes what is happening. I felt very awkward while he tells me this, and I wasn't even in the room. I can only imagine what he was going through. Apparently, the 2 older kids left the room, but the 13-year-old stayed until he turned off the television 10 minutes into the first episode. Story 66. My life is a series of awkward events, so I may keep posting sad stories here for your entertainment. My dad lived out of town and came over for dinner. My lovely wife and I made him a nice meal, and we all decided to watch a movie together. I let my dad sit in my comfy recliner while my wife and I sat on the love seat next to him. About 10 minutes into the movie, my dad abruptly pulled out his phone, scrolled to my cousin's page, and opened one of her pictures. He said, "Have you seen your cousin's post? She's looking great. Just think, you could have wound up with her, son." My wife stood up, walked to the kitchen, and began doing the dishes while I told my dad it was late and time to go. I was eventually able to comfort my wife, but I didn't bring it up to my dad for months. He was very embarrassed and apologetic, and he passed away not long after. Sometimes older people just say unexpected things, I guess. Story 67. My former boss spoke German as a second language and was gay. He invited my boyfriend and me over for a dinner party and the finale of RuPaul's Drag Race. His friend from Germany was there, and I thought it would be a blast. However, he ended up getting really drunk and started making my boyfriend feel uncomfortable. He kept pointing at him as if he was a problem, and when RuPaul said, "We live in a world not fully accepting of us," he shot my boyfriend the dirtiest look. He and his German friend spoke in German for most of the night, completely excluding us. I have never felt more awkward and uncomfortable in my life. He was a big guy and very drunk, so I had to make up a lie about our taxi coming early in case he became aggressive toward my boyfriend. We never talked about it, and I never brought it up again. It's crazy how drunk and hateful he became over a guy he'd never met. Just because my boyfriend was straight, he was viewed as an enemy. For your information, my boyfriend watches RuPaul with me and is one of the least hateful people I know. I wouldn't want to be with him if I thought he was homophobic, and my boss's behavior was completely out of line. Story 68. My girlfriend and I were having an intimate moment when her mother unexpectedly entered to ask her something. It was dark, we were under the covers, and her mother hesitated with her question. Fortunately, she acted as if she didn't see anything and closed the door. I am grateful to that woman. Story 69. Public speaking blunders can lead to feelings of embarrassment and nervousness about forgetting your lines or saying the wrong thing in front of a crowd. Story 70. I am a pool technician, and I was using a bucket on the side of the house when my elderly customer, Mrs. Betty, caught me. That was unfortunate. Story 71. I was dating a guy from Sweden, and he was uncircumcised. It was a new relationship, and I wasn't completely comfortable around him, which added to the awkwardness. We were watching Sex and the City, and the episode featured discussions about uncircumcised penises, with the characters making mean comments. I had no idea what to do, so I kept watching and tried not to look at him. Maybe I should have changed the episode. Story 72. I was 16 and working in my first job at a hair salon, performing basic hair treatments and limb massages. While washing a client's hair after a color treatment, She asked why we used a specific shampoo to wash out the color. I explained that the shampoo contained ingredients that helped wash out the chemicals and neutralize the pH of the scalp, along with a nourishing conditioner to protect her hair. She seemed satisfied with my answer, so nothing more was said. I went to prepare a drink for another client when the hairdresser who had done the color treatment approached me. She questioned why I mentioned the word chemical to a cancer patient. It's important to note that she was using permanent hair color, which, according to the label, contained ammonia. Last time I checked, ammonia is indeed a chemical. In fact, water is a chemical too. I burst into tears, feeling guilty for causing a scene. Later, I felt frustrated that she misled her client when perhaps using permanent hair color was an issue in the first place. I left after 3 months. It was not the best place to work. The products and hair services were beautiful, but the staff was terrible. Story 73. I had to fire my own boss after he approached me, in front of his supervisor, with a cake for what he believed was my last day. I had been offered his position because it became clear he was ineffective and had burned too many bridges in the community to establish fruitful partnerships. While he was presenting me with the cake, I had to inform him that I had accepted a new role and that I didn't believe there was a position left for him. Story 74. I, a 40-year-old gay man, had a personal trainer who is 33 and identifies as straight. We trained and smoked afterward. I was sure he was flirting with me. Standing too close, smiling broadly, maintaining eye contact, and giving compliments. I had a big crush on him. One day, he put his arm on my shoulder while I was showing him something on my phone. A few days later, after smoking post-training, he was showing me where he lived for an unrelated reason. I plucked up the courage and slowly put my hand around his waist. He froze for a few seconds and then asked what I was doing. I said nothing and took my hand away. He reacted in a strange way, so I went to the changing room, mumbled goodbye, and left. We pretended it never happened, but he wanted to be my business associate afterward. Story 75. My friend, with whom I worked, was in the middle of a divorce. Her husband had cheated on her and gotten another woman pregnant. Even though they were separating, they remained quite cordial to each other as they had 2 children together. I thought of both of them as my friends since I had hung out with them several times, babysat their children, and so on. Fast forward to the finalization of the divorce. My friend asked if she could give my number to her ex. I said, sure. I never asked why. I just thought he probably wanted me to babysit or something. Later that day, I received a text asking if I wanted to hang out. Of course, I did. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I thought it would be nice for me, my friend, and her ex to do something together. They still liked doing things together with the kids, and I assumed it would be something similar. I was so wrong. He asked me on a date. I went directly to my friend and told her what had happened. She said, yeah, it was my idea. I love you, my ex loves you, and my kids love you. I want my kids to be around someone I trust. And insert name here, agreed. I was completely flabbergasted. For a little more context, I was 20 at the time. She and her ex were in their early to mid-30s with a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. I just couldn't do it. Felt so strange. I tried to explain to my friend that I wouldn't do that to a friend, and she was so confused, repeating, but it was my idea. 18 years later, I still think about it and kind of regret not going on at least one date. So strange. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.